Hi there, this is the Lost Boy, and thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and comment on any of today's topics below. This week, Epic Games announced a $100 million prize pool for the year, absolutely dwarfing the next largest competitive esports game. This gives aspiring Fortnite players yet another reason to hop onto the popular free-to-play Battle Royale game that's been dominating the gaming sphere recently. During the same week, news resurfaced around the developers of PUBG suing Epic Games over similarities between PUBG and Fortnite. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm fairly sure you can't copyright game mechanics or general ideas like using a frying pan both as a weapon and armor. No one is being accused of stealing code or 3D assets or anything like that, so the whole thing seems a bit bogus to me, especially being that PUBG itself borrowed heavily from both H1Z1 and the Japanese film, which also happened to be named Battle Royale. Hopefully, Epic has a little bit of money left over for lawyers after laying out all that prize money. Speaking of ludicrous amounts of money, a game called Star Citizen that was crowdsourced back in 2012 has now gathered over $200 million and still has yet to reach beta testing, let alone getting an honest-to-goodness release. That's not actually the ridiculous part, though. Recently, users discovered a player pack available for purchase that's priced at just about $27,000 US. The pricey DLC allegedly includes access to all of the game's over 100 ships, as well as extreme shortcuts to certain titles or positions in the game's ecosystem. I guess nobody's worried about pay-to-win being a problem. The kicker is that this particular player pack was not even viewable for anyone who'd spent less than $1,000 on the game already. I guess that's just to weed out those of us who'd rather use that 27 grand on a quality used vehicle and a down payment on a house. Sheesh. I also wanted to mention that a few current and former employees from BioWare and EA took the opportunity to publicly dance on the grave of recently passed gaming YouTuber Total Biscuit the Cynical Brit. The offenders then bravely followed up their statements by immediately privating their Twitter accounts. You know, like real warriors do. I'm not saying everyone has to appreciate everyone else's opinion or content, but most people could agree that the time for a public Twitter flaming is not when a person's loved ones are busy grieving for their loss. Perhaps, in the end, one particular Brit could be forgiven for his cynicism. This week's main topic is a game that's currently getting a lot of attention called Active Shooter. It's a first-person shooter set to release on Steam, which is marketing itself as a simulation of a mass school shooting. If that weren't thrilling enough, the game includes modes where the player can experience the simulated event not only as a law enforcement officer, but also as a bystander or hostage, and even as the armed psychopath committing the attack. I've been around long enough to know that there will always be a few people out there who are more than willing to play a game like this. There are lots of people who actually seek out the most rancid, awful forms of entertainment that they can find. Ever hear of the human centipede? If you haven't, just forget it and let's move on. I think I'm being fair, though, when I say that these shock seekers are by far the minority when it comes to the average games consumer. My question here is the right of those fans of the hardcore to what they consider entertainment more important than the right of everyone else not to be exposed to a certain level of extreme content? The simple argument is, if you don't like it, then don't buy it, and all video games are protected under free speech laws. First off, Steam is a private company, and if they decide blowback from a particular game is not worth it, then free speech laws don't even enter into it. Even free speech laws have their limits, such as falsely yelling fire in a crowded theater. I'm sure very few people would defend a game where the object was killing certain ethnicities, sexual orientations, or religious or political groups on the grounds of free speech. Certain things are simply generally accepted as being beyond the pale. In my opinion, the developer of this game likely not only knew this, but was specifically planning on cashing in on the notoriety that would inevitably come from making a game like this. You think this studio wants to facilitate a deep and layered conversation about gun violence in America? Or is it more likely an obvious way to sell a bunch of copies of what looks to be a fairly lackluster little piece of shovelware based almost entirely on controversy and the shock factor? Shock and controversy caused by real-life tragedies where real human beings endured unimaginable pain and loss. Don't forget either that this game is being released in a world where crusty old white dudes are claiming that it's actually video games that are to blame for the frequency and severity of real-world violence. See last week's video for more on that. For real though, I don't really see how this passed muster at Steam, which has a policy which prohibits certain types of extreme and highly offensive content. Breaking news! Just now, I tried to look up the specific wording for that Steam policy, and it now appears that less than an hour ago, Valve announced it will remove Active Shooter and its developer from the Steam digital storefront. Score one for common sense, I guess. I'm all about freedom of expression and freedom of speech, but as the saying goes, discretion is the better part of valor. I'm certainly not a fan of giving ammunition to people who try to make video games the simple scapegoat for complex and nuanced issues like gun violence and antisocial behavior. If you have any thoughts or opinions about Active Shooter or any of the other topics, as always, I'd be interested in hearing them. Always remember your happy thought, and I'll see you next time.